Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome for another episode of the Soccer Performance Podcast. We're here with a guest from Florida, USA, Zach Woodward. Zach is a strength and conditioning coach operating out of there, specializing along with ACLs, which is a very, very common and, you know, horrific injury, which happens a lot in soccer. So a lot of good insight today. And, we'll let Zach introduce himself in detail. Zach, welcome.
Thank you guys very much. Looking forward to being here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Cool. Zach, you able to give us a little bit, what you're doing now, how you started and kind of your experience with the game and what you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. I've grown up playing soccer my whole life. I managed to play some D2 college soccer down here in Florida. Played that for a few years, but ran into some injury problems personally. I broke my ankle, had surgery on that, had a kind of rough recovery process, and that kind of got me started into more of the injury and return to sports space that I'm in now. Have been into weight training and strength and conditioning probably since high school. Got into collegiate strength and conditioning. I've coached in 3 different collegiate weight rooms, coached Division I national champions, and then got into more of the private sports performance facility before finally going out and branching out and doing stuff on my own. So taking a little bit more of that emphasis on injuries, helping guys come back from injuries, prevent injuries in the first place. I've got a little bit of a kind of unique training methodology. It's based a lot around the ATG training system, around the knees over toes guy. He's been a good friend and a good mentor of mine. So I've used that along with other stuff that I've learned along the way to help guys come back from some of these injuries that you mentioned before.
Cool. And can you tell us a little bit about ATG? What's the kind of, what's kind of the philosophy there and what do you look to and what kind of results has it given you and your clientele?
Yeah, absolutely. So fundamentally, it's a strength and conditioning system where we're really based around trying to keep guys healthy as much as anything. So it's a blend of health and performance, really trying to help people prevent or come back from various injuries. And so some of the big ways that we do that are by placing a little bit more of an emphasis on training the joint as well as the muscle tissue. So a lot of the deep ranges of motion and things like that we work through are very beneficial for the actual internal structures in the joint, the tendons, the ligaments, the connective tissue. And so working that can help make people stronger, kind of I call it from the inside out. So not just the muscle tissue, but the joints themselves, which helps make them more elastic, make them a better athlete, but also help either prevent if they haven't had any or come back from injuries that they're dealing with, ligamentous injuries and things like that, as well as just a little bit more of an emphasis on the whole body, a lot of stuff through the foot and ankle, the lower leg, as well as the knee. A lot of the traditional strength conditioning and kind of power-based stuff that people focus on is around big movements like squats and deadlifts and power cleans and things like that, where we spend a lot of time kind of powering up the glutes and the posterior chain, but then maybe don't necessarily have the pieces in other places to be able to handle that. So the example that we really use is kind of talking about putting a race car engine in a golf cart kind of thing. If we have this big, strong, powerful engine, but we don't have the chassis and the tires and everything like that to be able to handle that. And that being one of the reasons that athletes are breaking down and having plateaus. So we just try and level up that entire system. In terms of results, it's been very, very effective for people that I've had coming back from injuries, but even from a performance perspective. When I was in college, like as an actual college athlete, I ran a 5.2 40 as a freshman, which is remarkably unimpressive for people that are in that space. And today, since then, like not even being a college athlete now, being a little bit later, like I'm running in the 4.5s, the 4.6s. I can dunk on a good day. Like it's really transformed my own athleticism. From a mobility perspective as well. I was usually always known as the stiff guy on my team, could barely touch my toes. And now I'm one of the most agile, the most flexible, can move really well, feel great. And so this kind of training system and methodology has been a big part of that.
Cool. And would you say, so I guess one of the biggest rocks that come to mind for me is the deep split squat, the deep knee over toe split squat. Was that the one you would say that kind of gave you that athleticism more, like helping with that power, that vertical and that sprint speed, or were there a bunch of other pieces there as well?
That's definitely a big one, but it really is the system as a whole. The idea is we're really trying to address a lot of imbalances. Where are your specific weak links? And so it's really not what's the one specific exercise. But it is that combination of everything, because you can get a lot of benefit out of one, but without bringing up the rest of it. Like, what is that one kind of weak link that's holding back the entire system from developing? And so a lot of people have that, are developed very well in some areas and missing just one or two things that if they were able to unlock would just let the whole system kind of catch up and go to another level. And so I think that was the biggest thing for me. I was fairly strong already, especially compared to most soccer guys, but opening up some of that mobility, taking care of some of those weak links really allowed me to express that to a higher level.
Yeah, cool. Makes sense. So let's say in like a traditional kind of, how does your approach then different compared to, let's say, a traditional ACL approach? Like how early are you introducing those type of movements like in a rehab process? And how different does this kind of rehab process look to compared to the traditional method, would you say?
Yeah, so it depends on when I get to work with people. I'm a personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach. I'm not a physical therapist, so a lot of times I'll lean on them in those early stages to get them back on their feet, get moving, and that sort of thing. So it depends on when they come to see me. But as soon as we start working together, we're going to start implementing some of these things. Some of the biggest differences, one, what I really talk about a lot with people is just the intensity. A lot of physical therapists, just based on the model that they're in, a lot of times it's not their own fault, but they struggle to really challenge and push athletes. A lot of times it's designed to get them back on their feet, back moving and stuff like that, be able to get through their day-to-day life. But after a few months, it kind of stops becoming a challenge. They've maybe got like kind of mom and pop on the table next to them. Like, it's not an environment that's designed to get you back to high level sports, being able to play, run, cut, change of direction, everything like that. So we take a lot of those principles and we can just scale up the intensity, actually challenge these guys more to be able to get a stimulus that's going to create an adaptation where they can get stronger. My goal for everybody that I work with is to come back a stronger, a better athlete than you were before you got hurt, not just to kind of get back on the field and be able to go through the motions and that sort of thing, but really be able to level up. So that intensity piece is really, really big. And then the actual kind of training methodology itself. So getting into some of these deeper ranges of motion, stuff where we're going to challenge the joint as well as the muscle tissue. These are some of the big rocks that really help us kind of move the needle to another level compared to some of these traditional approaches.
Cool. And how early would you say, let's say you get a guy 4 months post-op, how early are you going to try to, or would you like to introduce kind of like deep kind of knees over toes kind of work? And how are the athletes, how do they kind of buy into that stuff? Are they kind of really hesitant? Or I imagine there would be some hesitant ones, and depending on how in their head they are and stuff like that and what they've been told.
Yep. So now it's starting to become easier because I've been doing this for a little bit longer. I've got a little bit of a reputation, like more like now guys are kind of know what they're getting into when they come in. But in terms of that buy-in piece, I mean, honestly, the easiest thing is that after the first session, you're going to start to feel better. Like, if you're doing things the right way, if you're doing things that the body likes and responds well to, like, you're not going to be fixed, but at the end of 60 minutes, you're going to feel better than you did when you walk in. So you can really get just that instant feedback. That's like, okay, yeah, maybe we're starting to move things in a good direction here. In terms of when people will start to get into some of those deeper ranges of motion, it's really kind of as tolerated. I've worked with guys as soon as kind of 4 weeks post-op, which is a little bit earlier than I usually do, but I had a professional guy from Chile come in still in his big knee brace and that sort of thing. And we were able to just do a ton of kind of backwards walking on the treadmill, a ton of kind of calf and tibialis work for his ankle and his lower leg, and get him an amazing workout that didn't cause him pain 4 weeks into training. So then we just kind of progress him based off when he's able to tolerate that stuff. Some of the deeper ranges of motion and things like that, it can look very advanced and look very intimidating. Most people, what they don't realize is how actually regressed and how gentle we're starting. So with people like that, where a lot of times what we're starting them is having 2 boxes on either side of them where they can literally support their weight as much as they need to. I'll tell people, do a push-up, do a dip on the box where you're maybe only putting 10, 20, 30 pounds of pressure onto the knee compared to your own body weight. And so we can just gently start to move through that, get a little bit of range of motion, get a little bit of bending, and then we progress at whatever level or whatever rate they feel comfortable with. The biggest umbrella, like kind of principle or philosophy that we have with everybody is that nothing should be painful, right? So everything should be hard, but not hurt, We want things to be challenging so that way we can get stronger and come back, but we're not pushing through pain really at any level of or any time in our training. And so using that as a guidepost allows people to get into that very safely at kind of whatever level or whatever kind of time frame they're looking at.
Well, that's cool. And that makes a lot of sense. I really like what you said about you should feel good after the session. That's a huge rule for me, like especially in rehabs. Like, I've heard all kinds of stories, like other people doing things and they're just in pain and then being told to go through pain, and it's really counterproductive and probably just a sign where you're not on the right track. So, and I know in Canada, like I've heard of some horror stories, ACL recoveries where guys are cleared and their physio hasn't even touched their hamstrings at all in the rehab process. And then I've heard all kinds of stories where they've retorn in their first game back, and it's just a mess. Have you kind of seen things like that down there, or are there some like huge mistakes that you've seen? Or
Yeah, unfortunately, you do see a lot of those stories like that. Just to that one point too, you mentioned with pain, of the example that I like to give to people that usually kind of hits that point home is if we think about how stuff in the gym works in general. So we go to the gym, we lift weights, we damage the muscle, but then we rest, recover, and we grow back stronger. So like we intentionally take one step back in order to take 2 steps forward. When we're pushing through things that are painful, uncomfortable, where it's typically a signal to our brain that we're doing a little bit more damage that we can actually recover from. So actually taking 2 steps back and only 1 step forward. So the more you do that, the more you beat your head against the wall, the more you try and push through that, you're actually just setting yourself up backwards. And so that's an analogy that I use a lot with athletes that I find to be very helpful for actually getting that point across. Because a lot of people, like especially like our athletes, like we are trained and we like to push ourselves and to challenge ourselves. And so sometimes they'll just kind of ignore that and they'll try and push through anyway. They want to push through. And so using that can kind of help them put that in check. But yeah, I mean, it's very, very common. The re-injury rates amongst ACLs are terrible. Statistics around that are terrible. I mean, the stats around just injury rates are also going up. There's lots of reasons why that can contribute to that, but only about half of people that ever go through an ACL tear will get back to the level of playing that they were before. So if you were a college athlete, only half of you are ever going to play college again. Some of you may play recreationally and stuff like that. Great. But literally only half are going to get back to that level. Of that half, within the first 2 years, another half are then going to either re-tear or injure the other leg. So we literally are left, we only have 25% of people that will ever go through an ACL tear and ever play at that same level again without getting hurt. Like the stats are honestly just terrible. And so that's clearly a sign that whatever we're doing in the rehab, the recovery process, we're not doing enough. We're missing something somewhere along the way. We're doing something we shouldn't be. We're not doing things we should be. I think a lot of that comes down to that intensity piece. But yeah, I've had lots of conversations with people that, just like you said, if I was cleared to play, I didn't really feel amazing. First game back, put your foot in the ground, and boom, just had to go through it all over again. So that's a lot of why I do what I do, is to try and start to do what I can to change that and to help people have better experiences. But yeah, there's lots of stuff in that space right now that's not as good as it could be.
That's really good. Juan, any I know you probably fall in that statistic he was just talking about there with your story.
Yeah.
Anything you want
No,
to
I
pass
mean, I first of all, I think it's very interesting what you're saying. I just wanted to just touch upon the fact that I think a lot of people have, Mayor mentioned you have difficulty sometimes with buy-in because they look at the way you move or at the way that other truly experts in the field are doing things, and they think, I mean, obviously you're moving beyond what's normal considered, the average of the population. So everything's about progression, right? And I don't think that there's a max point. It's relative to each person, right? Your max range is relative and it continues to move, but it makes logical sense that if you do not go beyond pain, you're creating a larger capacity of movement. And so I just find that very interesting, especially from a personal perspective. Like Mayor said, I tore my ACL. The approach wasn't horrible. I don't know if I was as challenging on my own body as I could have been, and the result of that was like exactly what you guys were talking about. I would train, get back into rhythm 2 weeks, and I would have some sort of small injury, small setback that wouldn't allow me to compete at that same level. And you think it's the actual injury, but it's really just creating strength and tolerance in that joint. And now, I mean, from a personal point of view, everything kind of gives me flashbacks where it makes complete sense if it's explaining the way that you're talking about it, and if it's in context of everyone's scenario. There's really no doubt that there's a lot of gap right now between traditional recovery or traditional rehab and just innovation, call it, and new ideas that are just logical if explained properly.
Yeah, and that scalability piece is huge. Like the I do the same things that I have my fresh off of ACL clients have that I've had my mom do. Like we'll do the same training, the same movements and that sort of thing. It's just the intensity will scale. And so that piece makes it something that you can go from fresh off of surgery, you can go from 60 years old and untrained all the way. You can push that as far as you want to. And so that makes it really accessible to everybody. If it's just finding where you fit on that spectrum, and then we can just slowly start to notch up the intensity as you feel comfortable, as you progress, and you can take that as far as you want to. Like we can go to a very, very high level with this sort of thing. And yet to your point of, we're really just trying to build the capacity of the knee in this case, of just what can this structure do? Like how can we make the knee itself stronger? How can we build the tissue around that, just to give you options to be able to do whatever it is that you want to? Like, can we give you the freedom to be able to, or build that up to give you the resilience to be able to handle the stresses of football, of whatever it is that you want to play? And then you can just go out and do your thing and not have to worry about all of this stuff in the first place.
No, I think that's very important. And to touch on what you guys were saying about pain, I think there's a huge mental misconception of, the no pain, no gain philosophy, call it, where you're not looking for pain, you're looking for soreness, right? You're looking for, it's a different feeling. And I think sometimes players blur the line between pain and soreness. And you end up doing things that are painful. Your mind kind of tricks you into thinking that that's going to be positive. So you don't, no alarms go off. Right. And then you wonder why things are wrong. So I think it's super important. It's a great takeaway to highlight that you're looking for soreness, but you're looking for something that you can tolerate. You should never, ever be in pain. You should never be in a position where you truly feel, it's very hard to put a word to that feeling. But yeah, I would say it's soreness, right?
Yeah, and that's where, like, that's a very good point, because it is a very fine line between that challenge and discomfort is maybe a way of thinking about it as well. But that is one that we pay a lot of attention to. And so, like, I'm constantly asking guys as we're doing stuff, like, does this hurt? Is this painful? And so maybe making the distinction between something that feels like sharp, uncomfortable, stabby, like true, like pain, damage, like this doesn't feel right, versus the discomfort that will come from training, right? Of just like, this sucks, this is hard, like my muscles are dying, everything like that. That is a very kind of fine line to navigate. But it is an important distinction, because that is like the no pain, no gain. Like that's what people are talking about, is the challenge bit. But yeah, it can get misconstrued and put over into this camp. So having that clear delineation between the two is very, very important. Because yeah, we definitely want you to push. Like it's going to be harder what we do than anything else that you've done before, but it shouldn't be uncomfortable. It shouldn't be something that feels negative. It should feel like a positive stress.
Zach, I want to ask you something. How do you now, with your background in the game, how do you use that knowledge to kind of create something that's more unique based on your playing experience? How do you now tie in the physical side with maybe more technical work, just given the fact that you played? I'm curious to how you do things like that.
That's interesting, because to be honest, I'd say they're still fairly separate. Of like the physical stuff in the gym is to build certain attributes to help make you a stronger, a better athlete, but then you still need to go and actually play on the field. That's one of the biggest distinctions that I think can sometimes get lost, of like all of the stuff that we're doing in here, assuming you're healthy and stuff like that, talking about just guys trying to become better soccer players, become better footballers. Like all the stuff that we're doing in the gym, if done well, can help make you healthier and can help make you a better athlete. It can't make you a better soccer player. Like you have to go out and do that yourself, and still prioritizing like the game, actually having high levels of skill playing and that sort of thing. I would say the biggest distinction in terms of my kind of evolution over the years, what I used to do is just the stuff that I do in the gym to enhance my performance on the field is much different than it used to be. I got into like the strength and conditioning world the same as everybody else. A lot of the just squat, bench, deadlift, just get stronger, get good at these big movements and stuff like that. And I experienced the same challenges that a lot of people do of I got bigger, stronger, and slower, like became less athletic, didn't move as well. And so changing kind of how I do things now to put more of the emphasis on these different movements, this different training style that we've kind of touched on so far, that has allowed me to then restore and even improve some of that athletic ability, that movement quality that then enhances my technical ability and everything that I do on the pitch.
Yeah, very important to highlight. I think I kind of wanted to shape that towards that we always talk about the balance of both things, but you can't really play at your max potential if your body isn't trained at its max potential, both technically and physically. So I think it's very important. I think sometimes there's like battles between coaches in different fields that this is more important than that, or vice versa. So I think it's really, really good that you highlight the importance of then the specificity of your sport. At the end of the day, right? I'm sure you could train a basketball player beside a soccer player beside a volleyball player, and they're all going to benefit towards the specific demands of their sport, right?
And that's a good way that a very important kind of distinction that you put in there too, of we're trying to almost just remove the handbrakes, like take the inhibitions off so that you can then go and play your sport at a maximum intensity. Like so many people these days, like can't remember the last time that they played without like the little aches and pains, just a little bit of discomfort, tightness, stuff like that. And they don't realize how much that actually holds them back from expressing themselves athletically, creatively on the field in their chosen endeavor. And so that's even more than anything, like even more than trying to get you to run faster, jump higher, or anything like that. If I can just get you to actually feel your best, actually feel 100% on the pitch. Like when was the last time you truly went out and played and like, man, I feel incredible. I feel ready to go. And how much more freedom do you play with? And so that's really more than anything, the stuff that we're trying to do in the gym. Like that is the sensation and the quality that we're trying to chase of, can we just let you go and express yourself at your maximum capability? Because then you're going to be faster, more technical than at any other points. Like it doesn't matter if you get stronger and more athletic in the gym, if when you go out and play, you feel not quite 100%, a little banged up, like those gains that you made in there aren't going to carry over. And so we're just trying to clear all that stuff out, remove all of those inhibitions so that you can then go and be the best player that you can possibly be.
That's so good. I feel like it just came to mind that if you look at the North American player, the stereotype is a very stiff player. You know what I mean? It's a very rigid player. And you look somewhere like in South America, I don't know if they prioritize, let's say, traditional strength training, and the players are fluid. And we chase that, right? We chase training players to be fluid like they are in other parts of the world. But then, then it makes complete sense that the training system has to be fluid, and it can't be so rigid, because the product of such a rigid program is a rigid player, a very stiff player, which I think is such a simple takeaway. Sometimes less is more, I think.
100%. And that was where like the very first thing I touched on is none of the stuff that we're going to do in the gym is going to substitute or replicate like you actually having mastery and like technical skill of the ball. Like that's going to trump anything. Somebody who's a very talented technical player is always going to exceed and excel somebody who's just an athletic player. And so ideally we would like to have both, but there's just not sacrificing that movement, that freedom, that fluidity that you mentioned on the pitch to chase these different numbers in the gym just for the sake of chasing them. Recognize that we're trying to supplement that and enhance that, and just being very mindful of making sure that the stuff we're doing is actually doing that and not getting in the way from, not becoming a distraction.
Oh, that's fantastic.
On the topic of, you saying, when's the last time a player has felt good in their body to actually go in and express all their physical qualities on the pitch? Like the importance of, and I know with your system, taking in joint health, improving joint mobility, but through strengthening, right, of the joint. So using strength training to improve joint range of motion, but so that you have control over that, end ranges and stuff like that. I know working with soccer players, like how many come in and they just have terrible hips. And, just giving them more mobile, stronger hips all around, like how much better they feel. And I think that's huge. And I know in your system, you train it in a certain way. And there's all kinds of systems where, they look at joint range of motion, but like through strengthening, not just like passively stretching. I think that's huge. And players need to incorporate that stuff in their training. With that, I want to talk on the side of prevention now. So we spoke a bit about like on the rehab side. How does your approach differentiate in terms of prevention? And what are like some, let's say some key boxes you'd like to tick with some of your athletes in that dimension?
Yep. So to be honest, the training principles and what we're trying to do with them are the same, whether they're coming back from something or whether they're trying to just stay healthy and improve. The level that we'll train them at may be different. Obviously, somebody fresh off of surgery is not going to be able to be trained at the same intensity as somebody who's healthy and just trying to stay that way. But some of the keys are, like you touched on, can we get that strength through length is a concept that we talk about a lot. So we do stretch and want guys to be mobile, yes, but we also want guys to be strong in those end ranges. And so that full depth split squat that you touched on gets a ton of benefits in stretching and strengthening the knee itself, but also the mobility in the back leg is huge through that hip flexor. And by doing that with your own body weight or extra weight, we're actually taking load through that position as well. So it helps enhance the mobility, but now we're also getting stronger in that end range. So we're actually getting changes to the tissue itself, getting longer, stronger, more pliable, more supple, rather than strength training and then stretch, as that being separate things. That's a huge, huge piece. And then focusing on some of those key areas. So the hip flexor, the adductors, the groin, like you said, that hip mobility is a huge, huge thing for soccer players. It's the most frequent reoccurring injury in football is kind of hip flexor, groin pulls, things like that. And they're very just these nagging injuries that can tend to linger for a long time. The ACLs are the big ones, but in terms of frequency, it's these more smaller, like kind of muscular injuries through there. And so building strength through length is a massive one. I think that concept applied to the hamstrings, applied to the hips, is something that's probably the single biggest one. The full depth split squat combined with the seated good morning is my favorite superset, my favorite combo for footballers, because you get the forward and backwards, you get the hip flexor, and then you get the side to side, the groin and the adductor. So that concept is massive. And then the other one is training from the ground up. So actually building the foot and ankle. If you think about most traditional strength stuff, just what most people are doing in the gym, it's like squats, lunges, deadlifts, like box squats, all of these things where we're getting a large stimulus through the hips, the glutes, and the lower back, but very little through the foot, the ankle, the lower leg. The heels flat on the floor, like you never get sore in your calves from doing a set of squats, right? Maybe you do some calf raises at the end, but it's not trained with the same intent, the same drive as your big sets of squats. And so when we do that over time, if you just think about like the level, the capacity of your foot and ankle is here, and like our hips, our lower back is here, it's again that Ferrari engine in the golf cart example of we're just building up one without the other. And so that's that disconnect is how we run into issues and run into problems. And so actually training the foot, the ankle, the lower leg, the hamstring, some of these like smaller muscle groups or these areas with the same intent, the same drive, the same quality as these bigger areas allows us to be so much more, we call it being like a balance. So like we look at structural balance is a key. And so we have all of these different exercises they go through and they all train different qualities, different ranges of motion, different muscle groups. And it's almost like a roadmap as well of, okay, you're good at this. Ooh, but this one is lagging behind. So now we have a key like metric of can we improve this, bring this up to the same standard as all the rest? And that gives you so much more of a kind of balanced structural integrity so that we can go improve performance, but then also help stay healthy as we're playing.
Cool. And I really like how you touched on the lower leg, because I would say probably in the last 1.5 to 2 years, I just keep learning more and more about the foot and ankle complex and how important that is. And exactly, if it's you're weak there, you're leaking a lot of energy. that there's a lot of force going through there, and you're way more susceptible to injuries, even though let's say you have a heavy squat or whatever. So you might be strong at the hip and the knee, but the force, that you lose at the foot, if that's big, then, that's a really low hanging fruit. And we've had guests on the podcast before talk about barefoot training. I like to use, things like stuff that Cal Dietz uses, like the spring ankle model, like that. That's some stuff I like to use. Curious how like what kind of stuff do you use for the calf and kind of ankle and stuff? Like
little bit of all of that. I love, like, I'm usually the guy in the gym that as soon as my athletes come in, we're having them kick off their shoes, and so we're doing a lot of stuff barefoot. We do a lot of kind of pushing and pulling of sleds, so a lot of training where we're on the ball of the foot. So pushing and pulling sleds, different step up and squat variations where we're actually on our toes too. We kind of mix in variations there. As well as then direct kind of foot, ankle, calf work. The spring ankle isometrics are fantastic. I love those. Just direct strength training for the tibialis, the soleus, the gastroc, like single leg calf and tib work. And then I'm also a big fan of like sprinting barefoot and stuff like that as well. Like getting guys out to a field, sprinting barefoot. The first time you ever do that, if you've never done it before, every time people are coming back like, oh, my feet are so sore. They're all whining and stuff like that. I'm like, fantastic. It means we finally got a stimulus in there. So it's a little bit of a combination of all of those that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, cool. So with all of that, and here's kind of something I want to touch upon. So that's kind of how you look at it, prevention. But then in terms of rehab, it's the same pretty much. You said you're just kind of starting at a different point probably. And so overall, kind of, you're not just, when people say, what do I do to prevent ACL, right? You have your common things like, okay, hamstring and strength and this and that, but you're kind of training the whole system. And good. And I think it's a quote from Mike Boyle, which I really love. Good ACL prevention is just good training, because you got to tick all the boxes.
Yeah.
You can't just, say, okay, the ACL is 3 exercises and we're going to hammer those. It's the whole system. It's how you approach everything, kind of how your foot hits the ground, the strength of the muscles all around it, and then, into the plyo component, the change of direction component, sprinting and this and that. So, I mean, if you look at an entire ACL kind of prevention and rehab spectrum, it's just pretty much good training. So exactly. I think you going through that whole checklist of the whole body kind of alludes to that, and I think players need to understand that. Listening, Juan, anything there?
I mean, I think you guys are hitting that on the spot. I agree with everything that you're saying. And I think that even from a technical perspective, I tend to focus more on technique and more on the ball. But of course, it's just because of where I'm, of the space that I have. But you realize that even if you don't have the, let's just say, the professional eye or the expertise to understand these concepts, because I think sometimes trainers stay away from these things because maybe they're hesitant of what people are going to think, and they can't back up why they're doing that, right? And so, but from a technical perspective, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. The fact that players are hardly ever flat-footed, they're hardly ever in a position where the entire foot is in contact with the ground beyond standing as you're waiting for something to happen. But as soon as you start to walk, the foot is entirely right on the balls of the feet at all times. And so you realize that the stronger that you can create that structure from the basement, as you go up, you're going to get a complete product. You're not going to have strong knees if your foot is weak. It's very difficult to have, to see weakness in one specific joint and then still have a strong body, right? But at the same time, it's being able to train the capacity of the joint, right? If we're talking about the ankle, it's still being able to have real control of both dorsal and plantar flexion of that ankle, right? It's not about just being on your toes either. So I think it's super important that players see that from a perspective where if you can't do anything, just take your shoes off, bounce a little, create any sort of skipping action. And even if it's 5-10 minutes a day, right? Even if you don't know what's going on, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to have a stimulus that is going to be, if anything, at least towards injury prevention. It'll help you towards, keeping yourself a little healthy.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, like you're only as strong as your weakest link. It's true of like a chain, it's true of you. So it doesn't matter how exceptional you are in 4 or 5 areas. If you have one area, whether it's the foot or whether it's something else that's lagging behind, that's going to be the thing. That's your baseline. That's going to be the thing that holds you back, no matter how high you keep focusing on everything else. And so that's where your greatest joy and your greatest return on investment will come from a training perspective. It's unfortunately, it's not the things you're already good at. It's the things that you suck at that you can improve the fastest on. But that is also the flip side of it. It is a positive of you can improve extremely quickly because these areas that you've been overlooking, you have all of those newbie gains still waiting for you to unlock, and you can actually level up fairly quickly if you focus on that and if you train in the right way.
100%. Mayor,
Zach,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, what was that one?
No, go ahead.
I was gonna ask Zach, what would you say is like, every system receives its backlash and whatever. What would you say are the biggest criticisms of, let's say, the ATG method? And then, are they just simply misunderstandings, people not fully understanding this the system, let's say? Yeah,
one of the big ones is like, oh, like it's so like quad dominant and everything like that, it's going to make you whatever. That's the big term that gets thrown around a ton in the fascial movement space for people that are talking about that sort of thing. Another one, I guess, is that it's not the training is like the intensity is too low compared to like lifting these big weights you are on like a squat or a bench or a deadlift or things like that. Like when you're doing some of these more smaller, like isolated movements, you're not lifting as much weight, so it doesn't look as sexy. But I don't know. I would just say that I think the results for that kind of speak for themselves. Look at the people that are going through that. It's like within specifically the ATG system, I think they're 3 guys that are pushing 50-inch vertical jumps, which is insane. Like there's maybe only a handful of guys in the entire world that are doing that, and to have that many coming from the same system, like should tell you something. Like the story of Ben Patrick personally, like my own self, like the transformation that I've had. I've yet to see, like there's lots of people getting awesome results, but I don't think I've seen the actual transformations in terms of health and athleticism that I have from any other system, to be perfectly honest.
And Zach, just a question that I have: when, let's say you have a player, right, and their feedback is that they were a little bit too sore, or I guess what I'm asking is when can you personally say, you know what, that was a little bit too much, we regress? What's that line? Where have you ever been in a situation where, because it's not all perfect, right? No training systems are just full 100% foolproof. Have you been in situations where is it just a management of volume? Is it really that? Because I think that's what I want to gear that towards. It seems like it's just being able to manage volume and intensity, and being able to be honest and really, really self-aware, to actually get genuine feedback, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think the intensity one would be the biggest thing, and that pain threshold really being the kind of the defining factor of like, oh, if this starts to hurt a little bit, then okay, that's probably when we need to scale back. And pain is something it's something that we really are mindful of not trying to push through, but it's also something that I pay attention to because I want to get as close to that as we can. So if we try a movement as a deep squat, for example, and like that feels uncomfortable, painful, it's a little bit sketchy, like that's something that I'm very much will key in on. And so we'll scale back the intensity, but then I want to get as close to that as we can, because the fact that there's something painful there means that we have something that we need to address. Like pain is something that we don't want to push through, but the areas that are painful are the areas that you have the most room to improve, the most room to adapt and get stronger. So if we scale back just the intensity, taking some of the weight off, the floss bands are a huge troubleshooting tool that I use for when things are painful, uncomfortable. But basically, like my thought process is how close to that same spot can I poke at that without it being painful? Because then I know like everything that I do that's not painful, we're starting to get a positive adaptation. So can I make it as similar as possible to now we're starting to clear out the reason that pain is there in the first place? That's always like, that's the thing. Like pain is a signal that something is going on. Something's not quite right. There's a little bit of damage, dysfunction, whatever. So how close to that area can I get in and then start to create an adaptation, start to get a stimulus that's going to help me heal, get stronger, and clear that out. So that way I can get rid of the reason that pain is there in the first place. I don't like icing. I don't like anti-inflammatories. I don't want to mask the signal. That's all it is a message. I want to deal with why that's there in the first place.
Cool. Really quick, we have a few more minutes. I want to touch a little bit on the fascia stuff. Get your opinion on there. So there's on Instagram, there's like this rise of fascial training, and everyone loves fascia all of a sudden. How do I say this? Would love to get your opinion on kind of that, and what players should be cautious of what they see on Instagram and stuff. Yeah, what's your opinion on it? And yeah, what would you say to players watching that stuff?
It's very interesting for sure. It's still a new field. There's lots of research that's coming out now. So we're still kind of learning more and more about it as we go. I think the concept itself makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of interesting. I mean, it is something that's like this entire whole body unit. It's a very big sensory organ, lots of proprioception kind of response in there. It's going to encase all of our muscle fibers. It's going to kind of contribute to the smoothness, the coordination of our movement. So I think there's something there, and it's worth getting into. The biggest hesitation that I see is around the actual training around it. Is there's lots of kind of people that are making big claims that if you do these towel curls, it's going to transform your life. And that's where I think there's a bit of a disconnect. Most of the time, all of these people are pointing at people that they haven't trained, doing things that they themselves haven't done to get results that they themselves then don't have. And so that is the biggest thing. That's why I keep coming back to some
red
ATG
flags
stuff.
there.
Exactly. It's like I'm looking at the actual results of like, so do some of the concepts and explanations around that make some sense? Yes, it's interesting. And I think there's still some stuff there and it's worth exploring and looking into. Just be careful about kind of fully drinking the Kool-Aid of like all of these people that are promising all of these incredible magical things. Like I haven't seen any of those actual results from the people that are doing it. So that would be my thing of, oh, if you're this guru, like, okay, and you've been doing this for 3 or 4 years, right? It's like, what can you do? Like, what can I hope to expect from in being in your place 3 years down the road? And so that would be the large grain of salt that I would have, is that the concept is interesting, but the training around it has yet to impress me to a sufficient standpoint, is where I would say.
Yeah, and if only the towel curls were such a high level stimulating exercise for the feet that it actually created some crazy adaptations that, you know, we would disregard all our other foot, ankle, calf training methods.
Exactly. Yeah. And even the stuff like all of the ATG stuff, like it's a lot of that working through some of these greater ranges of motion. Like one of the ways that you stimulate the fascia is through these stretched positions. So getting into some of these longer ranges of motion, like it's not like all of the stuff that we're doing they also make the claim that like there's fascia training and then there's non-fascia training.
Exactly.
When if it's really as integrated as they claim it's supposed to be, it interwoves with every muscle fiber, like all of the cells and that sort of thing, then it's going to be both. Like the sprinting and the plyometrics and the jumping that we do, like that is fascia training. We just don't kind of use that buzzword to try and get people to click on the stuff that we're doing.
Very good way to end off. Juan, anything? Then usually we finish off with, you know, a piece of advice you'd give to the players at home, and then just say where people can find you. We know you're really active on Instagram.
One thing I want to just quickly finish off on, guys, is towards any players, parents, coaches that are listening to this. You know, you have to be very self-aware. Don't get fooled. Look at, you know, who you're putting your trust in. Because at the end of the day, you're investing time, you're investing your energy, you're investing your money. You know, as long as development takes time, it's also time that you never get back. And so your body's constantly receiving information. The younger you are receiving quality information, the more likely you are to absorb it. So, you know, our goal with this podcast is just to present our audience with people that we find valuable. People that we find are doing something that's helpful. And yeah, so we just, to finish off, Zach, where can we find you? Where can players look for more info?
Yeah, like you guys mentioned, Instagram is probably the place that I'm the most active. So Zach Woodward, ATP, ZAK, that's where you'll find the most stuff that I'm posting. I'm also doing more stuff on YouTube now. We'll get more in-depth kind of long form stuff. And I do have a newsletter too that's really directed around all the ACL side of things. So that's a good place if you're looking for resources around that, where it's a little bit more kind of long form content. I appreciate you guys having me on. In terms of to answer Mario's question of just like last kind of tips, advice, and stuff like that for people. One for footballers specifically is kind of like we touched on in the beginning. Like nothing is going to substitute or replace your actual ability on the ball. So one of the actual, is somebody who's a gym guy, one of the hesitations, the cautions that I would give you is do not look for that as a substitute to make up for your gaps as an actual player. Use that as something that is going to enhance rather than replace all of your abilities on there. And still, like, if you know that there are certain gaps that you have as a player and certain qualities, certain attributes, like taking the time to develop that, and then using the strength training tool as a tool to help you be healthier and more athletic, not a better actual player. And so just making sure that the training that you're doing is giving you that result, that you are feeling better, more athletic, more mobile, after your training or as a result of your training, rather than stiff, tight, broke, beat up, that a lot of the kind of common advice, the common training out there is going to leave you.
Amazing. Mayor, any last words?
No, cool. Thank you very much, Zach, for having you on. We had a good chat, a lot of good topics there, and I think people at home listening will like this episode. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Have a good
See
one,
you
guys.
guys.
Take care.